All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. We're going to investigate the hidden, highly deliberate mechanisms that social media platforms use to harvest, well, our most precious resource, our attention. Our focus is increasingly becoming this incredibly scarce commodity, and its systematic destruction, it's having real, serious consequences for how we learn, how productive we are, our creativity, and just our overall well-being. So today, we're breaking down the whole shebang, the science, the algorithms, and the underlying economics behind how our minds are literally being rewired.
I want you to ask yourself a super quick question. Where is your phone right now? Honestly, if it isn't already in your hand, I'm betting it's probably within arm's reach, right? Because the answer to that simple little question actually explains a lot. It explains why we're feeling this collective, society-wide sense of burnout, anxiety, and just a total fragmentation of our deep attention. We kind of think we're just making casual choices to scroll, but the reality is we're interacting with massive systems specifically designed to hold us captive.
To put this into perspective, people are spending roughly 6.5 hours a day staring at their phones. 6.5 hours. That is a massive chunk of our waking lives just caught in this environment that is relentlessly pulling out our focus. We are swimming in a digital ecosystem that requires absolutely zero effort to consume, but demands an immense amount of willpower to actually escape.
So, to understand why we spend so much time glued to these screens, we really need to look at what we're actually consuming. Welcome to the brain rot economy. This is essentially a high-frequency trading environment, but instead of stocks, they're trading your attention. Now, unlike traditional economics, where supply simply follows demand, the algorithms here are generating a massive, nearly free supply of hyper-stimulating, low-utility content. You've probably heard it called slop, and the whole goal is to artificially induce demand. This sheer overproduction targets your brain's basic sensory stimulation. At the end of the day, it's trading your long-term, fundamental human well-being for immediate, short-term corporate profit.
And it does this by operating completely below our conscious radar. AI curates our feeds using these really subtle digital nudges to exploit everyday human vulnerabilities. Think about it. By targeting our FOMO, our fear of missing out, leveraging social comparison, and creating these identity-based engagement loops, the algorithms are essentially manipulating our emotions for one single reason: to keep us scrolling. We really think we're the ones choosing what to watch, but actually, we're being steered.
Layer 2, the digital slot machine. Let's peel back this first layer and look at the actual engineering behind the user experience, just to see exactly how these platforms keep us hooked so incredibly effectively.
Social psychologist Jonathan Haidt makes an absolutely crucial distinction about this. Smartphones and iPads aren't just the new TV. Television puts us in this state of shared, long-form narrative transportation, right? And there's no physical reinforcement. But touchscreens? They operate like a classic B.F. Skinner box. They isolate us. They serve up these high-frequency 15-second bursts of content, and they condition us with variable rewards every single time we swipe.
And here's the really wild part. Tech executives know exactly what they're doing. This isn't just some accidental byproduct of the technology, it's the core feature. Internal documents leaked from major platforms show researchers literally using the phrase slot machines when describing their retention strategies. Just sit with that for a second. They know that intermittent, variable rewards are the absolute most effective way to make behaviors incredibly hard to break, even when the content provides zero actual value to you. This whole predatory engineering setup is driven by a business model that author Cory Doctorow coined as N-shitification, which I know is a highly academic term, but it hits the nail on the head. Here's how it works in practice. Platforms offer you a great, totally free experience, purely to rapidly scale up and hook millions of users. But once they have you locked in, they inevitably degrade the user experience to squeeze every ounce of maximum profit out of you for their advertisers. It creates this huge existential crisis where platforms are literally forced to prioritize extreme algorithmic growth over things like youth safety or mental health.
Layer 3, your brain on algorithms. So what is this infinite scroll actually doing to our physical biology? Let's take a look at the neurobiological toll.
Okay, to start, 80%. 80% of people check their phones within minutes of waking up. From the very second we open our eyes in the morning, we're deeply ingrained in this addictive loop. We are essentially kickstarting our day by immediately plugging our brains into a high-stress, high-dopamine environment. To understand why we do this to ourselves, we have to look at the literal battle happening inside our heads. Dr. Aditi Nerurkar, who is a brilliant physician over at Harvard, explains this so perfectly.
You have your amygdala, which is basically your brain's primal night watchman. It controls your rapid fight-or-flight stress response. And then you have your prefrontal cortex, which is the part that handles deep logic, memory, and complex problem-solving. Well, when you engage in infinite scrolling, you rapidly upregulate that frantic, stress-driven amygdala, and doing that completely downregulates, blunts, and basically silences the prefrontal cortex, the exact place where your rational thinking lives. And this leads us straight into neuroplasticity. The fact is, your brain is like a muscle. It actively rewires itself based on how you use it. Heavy use of short-form video actually rewires your mesolimbic dopamine system. Over time, this literally reduces your reward sensitivity. It means that normal, everyday activities just don't give you joy anymore because you're constantly craving that extreme digital stimulation. I mean, studies are even showing that smartphone addiction can reduce gray matter volume and overall neural activity. So if you feel stuck, you are not weak. You are fighting a multi-billion-dollar algorithm that is physically altering your dopamine pathways.
Naturally, this biological hijacking cascades into some really severe societal fallout. We're seeing widespread phenomena like revenge bedtime procrastination. That's when exhausted people just scroll late into the night to reclaim a tiny sense of personal time, even if it means totally sacrificing tomorrow's energy and spiraling into chronic insomnia. We're seeing spiking rates of ADHD diagnoses, severe anxiety, and just a total fragmentation of deep attention across the board. We are quite literally transforming human potential into a super anxious, easily distracted generation.
Layer 4, auditing the machine. Okay, so if the biology is this damning and the engineering is this intentional, what exactly are global regulators doing to stop this massive extraction of our attention?
Well, the most aggressive attempt at regulation happening right now is the European Union's Digital Services Act, or the DSA. At the base of this whole framework, you've got universal rules for all services. But at the very top, they've placed strict special obligations specifically for VLOPs, very large online platforms. Think TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. These tech giants are legally required to undergo independent audits to actually prove their algorithms aren't causing systemic societal harm. But here's where the whole system kind of breaks down. Researchers analyzing the first wave of these DSA audits found a massive ongoing struggle. You see, current auditing methodologies are still largely rooted in financial accounting. They rely heavily on traditional checkbox compliance, basically treating these incredibly dynamic AI-driven socio-technical platforms as if they were just static financial ledgers. There is a huge fundamental gap between what a platform's written policy says and how their algorithm actually behaves in the wild. It just proves that current audits severely lack the technical depth needed to oversee these opaque black box AI models.
Layer 5, reclaiming your mind. Look, we don't have to wait around for international laws to change to fix this. We actually possess the power to override these primal urges right now.
Dr. Neuroscience suggests 3 incredibly practical boundaries for digital minimalism, and they're absolute game changers. First, turn your phone screen to grayscale. Seriously, do it. It strips away that Technicolor junk food appeal and instantly kills the visual dopamine hit. Second, when you're working or sleeping, keep the device physically out of arm's reach to prevent that subconscious brain drain where you grab it without thinking. And third, fiercely protect the first few minutes of waking up. Keep them completely, entirely screen-free. By just instituting these simple steps, you drastically reduce that slot machine effect and you actively starve the algorithm of your attention.
Which brings us to a final, pretty important question. If you actually successfully institute these boundaries, and you take back even a fraction of those 6.5 hours a day, what will you do with it? Seriously. Your attention is literally the most valuable currency in the modern world. It dictates your relationships, your potential, your entire reality. The machine has spent enough of it for you. How are you going to choose to spend it for yourself?